Welcome to Online SuperCoach podcast. Today, I'm very excited because we're talking about a subject that I love to talk about, that's sales. Our guest today has 17 years of experience doing everything from setting, closing, management of sales, training, and recruiting. He is the founder of Undeniable Closers. Mr. JD Daley, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, that's great. So we always like to start off the podcast with like a phrase or a mantra or something that gets you going. Do you have any?
Yeah. So this is a very simple phrase and there's not much to it, but it's had a profound effect on being able to decide the direction of my life. And it's the words onwards and upwards. Anybody that's worked with me knows that I say that basically as a response to anything. And I feel like the reason it's been so powerful is because sometimes we look for complexity to solve problems when really we need to go back to the simple. And just when you think about the direction of onwards and upwards, it really reminds you what's important and kind of gives you the answer, which is it's always about progress, it's always about persistence, and it's always about improvement. Whether things totally fall apart, I need to persist, I need to progress, I need to improve, or whether I'm at the top of the mountain and everything is going well for me, I need to progress, I need to persist, and I need to improve. And so it's just a mantra that comes to me whenever someone else is struggling with something, right? We talk them through it, and then it's onwards and upwards. So that is a phrase that I've used often.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I don't usually do this, but I'll share you one that I have because it's exactly kind of the same meaning. I say this to like staff and people around me all the time. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. So 100%. It's the same exact, for the same exact reasons that you just said. Like if you're not, even if you're doing well now, you have to keep moving forward. Otherwise, pretty soon you'll be going backwards. So you gotta, if you're moving forwards, then you're not moving backwards. So just keep going onwards and upwards. Keep moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we had a call this morning and it was kind of about that idea that most people just stay in this place of reactivity and they only do something when there's a problem or a deadline or a challenge or a roadblock, or they procrastinate until there's no time left, and they're only ever trying to get back above the surface. And then once they get comfortable, then they take their foot off the gas and life continues forward. So it's always about, being proactive in that pursuit of fulfillment and growth and happiness and financial freedom and all these elements that they're not coming to you. You have to go out and get them.
Well, we're in total agreement, 100% agreement. So before we get into some of my other questions, I just want you to get a chance to hear a little bit about your journey of, from sales, like where you got your start and how you progressed over the last, I guess 17, 20 years. So.
Yeah. So I kind of stumbled upon sales. It wasn't a career choice. It wasn't something that I, had a desire to do. It wasn't even something I knew I could do. But I had dropped out of university after about 3 weeks, realizing that wasn't for me. And I moved out west. I'm from Canada, and moved to Alberta, and I applied for like 200 jobs and got nothing. I was working at a bar at the time and it wasn't going well. And finally I got one response, and it ended up being a door-to-door company, which I had no idea. They talked about like, hey, it's some executive job. And in my mind, I was going to work on Wall Street and nice suits and stuff. And I showed up and they drove me out to the field, and I'm like, where are we? And I thought maybe the guy was going to his house, and he's like, we're here. And we started knocking on doors, and I was like, this is horrible. This is brutal. He's getting beat up. He's getting every rejection. I'm like, this really sucks. And at the end of the day, I was ready to pack it up and say thanks, but no thanks. And he's like, yeah, not a bad day. We made about 350 today. And I was like, what? I was 18 years old at the time.
Yeah.
I thought he made nothing. I was like, you took 96 no's and only got 4 yeses. How did you make that sort of money? And so from then on, I was kind of hooked. I went through door to door. Through that company, was able to do some business to business campaigns, just kind of knocking on businesses' doors. Then went through the whole kind of play. I did cold calling, did some stuff with Xerox for a while, then got into more account management, territory management. Finally had a few of my dream jobs, one in oil and gas, and then one for a couple agencies in Toronto, and just realized this corporate stuff was not for me. And so I quit, walked away from my dream job. Everybody thought I was crazy. And then about 7 years ago, I found the remote sales space, and originally kind of struggled to figure it out. It's kind of a weird world. And then started developing my own process for working through and developing my own personal brand and kind of treating my career like a business, and found some really good results. I had made about 120,000 in 4 months, and that
Oh,
year I
wow.
made 438,000, which is more than I ever made in my life by far.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And I was doing this while traveling around the world, 36 countries in 4 years. So I was hooked. And then kind of through that have been teaching other people. I started in the recruiting realm, but just felt like people were so underprepared for this industry and had no idea what they were doing. They're just kind of showing up, and this was the magical 10K a month industry that they'd all been
Yeah.
promised.
Yeah.
So I started working with them kind of on a one-on-one basis, and that's where Undeniable Closer Mastermind was born.
So, when you first started doing the sales yourself, when from the cold calling, when you were going door to door with the other guy, were you immediately had a knack for this? Were you, or, like, was it something you would just naturally like start when you first started doing it yourself? It was good, or you shaking your head no, or did it take
No,
some
not at
Yeah.
all. I sucked. I sucked. I remember like he was kind of getting me pumped up and saying like, okay, just piece by piece,
Yeah.
you're gonna get familiar with it. You're gonna feel all the fears and stuff. He was a good guy and he became a good mentor to me. Um, but I remember him being like, okay, this one, all you're gonna do is the intro, like just the first few words.
Right.
And knocks on the door and he's like, you ready? And I said, yeah. And then he ran away. And I was like, and some guy answered the door, and I think I said the wrong name and like mixed up the two words of the company, and it was horrible. And the guy was just looking at me weird and closed the door. And I was just like, what is going on? And I walked back, and he's just smiling. And he's like, there, that's the worst it's going to get. Are you dead? Okay. So the no's don't hurt you. It's actually the maybes in sales that are going to hurt you, but the no's don't hurt you. Whether
Right.
someone tells you to go screw yourself or they give you a nice reason why, it pays the exact same. And that was one of the first lessons I learned in sales, was that not to fear the rejection, but understanding that the no's and yeses are all part of the same game. And the roughness of the no doesn't matter.
Right.
And so it took me really about 3 weeks to just get my feet under me and just kind of understand what I was doing and get comfortable. But, I was kind of a late bloomer in that it took me probably 2, 3 months before I really understood it. And even in remote sales, it took me about 2, 3 months. Like I've always been kind of a feeler.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I understand deeply what I'm doing.
It's just 2 or 3 months you understood what you were doing, but is that when you started to like close your own sales, or?
Yeah, so it took me about 3 weeks to get my first sale, and that was like a total laydown.
Yeah.
Basically, I think they had already talked to the company on the
Yeah.
phone
Yeah.
and were,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, you're finally here. I'm like, yes. So yeah, probably 3 weeks to get my first sale, and then probably about 3 months before I started like rising the leaderboards.
So what
And
changed? Like what clicked? What did you learn? Like what clicked? By the way, I love what you said before about the no's don't hurt you. It's really the maybes that really is what the problem is, but not the no's. And that's exactly right. So it doesn't matter, especially on this online world with doing online sales, like remote sales. Who cares about the no's? Go on to the next one, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's really, really good.
yeah, absolutely. You start at no, right? Like
Yeah.
you're at no right now. If you don't talk to that person or you don't reach out because
Still
you're
enough.
afraid,
Yeah.
that's a no, right? So it's like just put yourself in that space. And so the beautiful thing about this company is in the morning they were doing this personal development stuff, and like I don't even think I read a book all through high school. I had other people doing my projects for me and stuff.
Huh.
And I had like my boss was 24 years old and he was doing about 400K a year, which I thought was just like, it
Yeah.
sounds silly, but I thought there was no, like, I thought doctors made 100,000 and then there was only like the ultra rich that made 1 million. I never thought about like
Yeah.
200, 300,
Yeah.
400,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I looked up to him. He's 24 years old. I was like, this is what I want. And all these like 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids were talking about books and growth and doing practice pitches and stuff. So I really started just picking up the books, and some of those concepts really got me fired up, and I really became obsessed with learning and developing. And so that was a big change for me, is like controlling the mindset. And then the other thing was just repetition, just going through and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Being able to adapt to these situations, because the the interesting thing about door knocking is you're starting from a deficit. Most sales opportunities, you're starting at zero. These ones, you're starting at -50. So
Yeah.
being able to
Who's
navigate,
knocking on my door? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You're ruining people's dinner and you're bugging them and you're a nuisance. And so being able to craft a way around that and get them to enjoy your company and then actually like thank you at the end, that was kind of a puzzle to me. And so a lot of practice and then conquering the mindset, I think, were
Yeah.
the two biggest thing that started to click and really understand what I was doing there and how I could maneuver what the solution was to the product. That was
Yeah.
a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of good stuff. Even getting comfortable being uncomfortable. That's another thing I always say. My boys do wrestling, and I was a big wrestler, and I think that's what's a great lesson you learn in wrestling is the wrestlers have to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable like all the time. And I feel like that's helped in life, because life is a lot of times uncomfortable. So
100%. And the
that's
same in
great.
wrestling, it comes from repetition, right? Like
Yeah.
first time you get mounted or the first time someone has you in a horrible position, your naturalness is to panic, right?
Yeah.
And when you panic, you put yourself in a worse
You just have to
situation,
be
and
comfortable
that
being
reps.
uncomfortable. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what was one of the hardest lessons you've learned in sales?
The hardest lesson is that if you're not proactively challenging your belief systems, your strengths will become your weakness. And that's something that we're always told to like lean on our strengths, lean on our strengths. But when you think about it, like, okay, say I'm really confident, that's going to serve me on day one. But when I plateau and I'm really confident in my
Yeah.
decisions and I know everything, all of a sudden it becomes a deterrent, right? My ability to work hard can become like the reason I'm not working efficiently, right? And
Yeah.
so I've noticed that especially it's a big switch going from sales, which is your only job is really one
Yeah.
thing, to now operating a business and realizing that you can't just add grit. You can't just work through everything and just power through. You have to be able to ebbs and flows. You have to be
Yeah.
able to surrender and push through, and kind of the balance of life, the yin and yang.
That's great. That's all great stuff. So, as a fitness professional, why should fitness professionals learn and continue to develop the art of sales? Why can't they just, rely on their expertise, their reputation? Why is learning sales? Do you think learning sales something that they should also perfect?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak as far as a fitness professional. I mean, we teach some fitness closers, but we're kind of the broad sense of sales and career development. But as far as why someone should learn sales, it's for me like one of the things that separates us in the space is we focus on the elements of a sale. A sale is really a result, right? And so many people are chasing the sale as a result, but that's not the effort. That's the result itself, right? And so when you break down what sales is, right, it's the communication, sending and receiving information, right? Influencing decision making. Our goal in sales is to facilitate the best decision possible. Now you
Right.
get some salespeople that aren't doing that, and their goal is sales, and then
Yeah.
that's when they get all the objections. But your job truly is to facilitate the best decision possible, yes or no. So when you think about those things, communication and influence, right? There's not an aspect of your life that wouldn't improve if you had the ability to be more influential and you were a better communicator. Your relationships get better, your interactions get better, yourself, right? Like I always teach from an aspect of like, if you understand yourself, you understand the prospect. So the same fears that you have, the same limiting beliefs, the same
Yeah.
imposter syndrome, they're dealing with that. And if you don't understand it in yourself, if you don't have the power to influence yourself, you lose that power of influence in other people. Then you have to rely on persuasion, and then it gets into manipulation. And one thing I've said is like sales is one of the most hypocritical industries in that you have all these salespeople expecting the prospect to act differently than they are in their own lives. And so
Yeah.
that's where I think the power of influence, and part of that is communication. So I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't benefit from at least learning the fundamentals and going out there. Again, there's also that idea of putting yourself in uncomfortable places. So I think there's a lot to be learned, whether or not you're going to do that the rest of your life, or that's something that you want to do. Sometimes you outsource it or hire other people,
Right.
right? That's, we help a lot of coaches with that aspect. But I think, one, it's also part of the leadership to know the role that you're hiring for.
Yeah.
So I think more coaches should at least start out by setting and closing their own deals so they understand, so they can be influential and have the respect of the salespeople when they hire.
That's great. That's really, really, really powerful stuff. I thank you. I agree with that. Um, what have you done personally to, over the years to sharpen your sales? Because obviously, even after the first 3 months or 6 months you doing it, you just kept going onward and upward. So,
Yeah.
so have you done anything like special or workshops or read any books? Or was there a certain, philosophy that you kind of follow? I was just curious.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking at ways to improve, and again, not resting on yesterday's results. The biggest thing for me is I went through all your classic sales from way back in the day, from Zig Ziglar to
Yeah.
Jordan Belfort, all the people that came up. But what I found was, when I really started to excel to the next level, was forget about the sales training specifically, and again, like, start breaking down the ideas of what are the elements that lead to a sale,
Right.
right? And so focusing more on the psychology of decision making. And so I dove and I nerded out on more of the psychology of, how do humans make decisions? When do they make good decisions? When do they make bad decisions? What are their biases, right? What happens when someone feels fear, right? And how is imposter syndrome? And what role does the ego play? And so one of the most impactful things was just like, what I found was, I got to a point where I was almost, it sounds weird, but I was almost too smooth. I knew the script so well, or
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
knew how to handle, I had the answer for every objection. And I started getting this compliment. And if you're in sales and you get this compliment, it's not a compliment at all. It's the worst
Yeah.
thing you can hear, which is, hey, you're really good at your job, but
Right.
that means it's kind of like watching, when you watch a movie, you want to forget that you're watching actors and you want to get lost in the role. It's
Yeah.
the same thing. You don't want to seem like a good salesperson. You
Yeah.
want to seem like a human that is facilitating this decision,
Who's
right? And
really
so I
cares about,
realized,
yeah, who really cares about what they need or want. Yeah.
exactly, right? So I realized I was getting too good at sales, and I lost the human aspect and the connection part and the trust and the vulnerability. And so I started just breaking down the mechanics of what happens inside this prospect's head, and where do different emotions come from, and the different descriptives. And the more I left sales and kind of just got curious about humans, the better I got, and the more equipped I was for different situations.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really powerful. And that's exactly right. Like the more you could just, if you have to rely on the script and go through it like word by word, obviously it's not going to come off as authentic. You got to be able to just keep the conversation organic, and you still want to drive to figure out the solution, for them. But I totally agree what you're saying is you want to keep the conversation very organic the whole time and really, get to know and understand exactly what's making them tick. So I totally agree with that. Why do you think it's important to find common ground, to, I think I've heard you say like maybe disarm the prospect. Like how do you get to the point where you can do that on like every single call?
Yeah. So I think, and we've been talking a lot about this in the mastermind, but it comes from a place of detachment, right? And so there's two points of detachment that I think everybody should focus on. Is, and it's never okay, I'm detached forever, right? We detach from it, and then we start, as things happen or we feel
Yeah.
pressure or quotas, we start to like move back towards it, and we have to have a ritual of detachment. But one is detachment from the outcome, right? And two is from detachment of what people think of us, right? If we can have those two detachments, then we're in a place where we can start to serve the prospect. Because I can gather the information needed, right? And the beautiful thing about it is the prospect needs to make the decision. I can
Yeah.
lay out the most logical, I can lay out all the reasons why, I can give them all the benefits, right? But at the end of the day, they're the one that have to make the decision. They have the ultimate veto power, right? And I think when the pressure is on, people think that like, oh, if I focus more on sales, I'll make more sales. And what I found is it's the total opposite, right? The more you're detached from it, the more you look at, instead of the sum, you look at the equation, like what makes up a sale, right?
Right.
When they trust me, when they understand me, when they realize that I am serving their best interest, when I'm vulnerable, when they see that I have integrity, when I'm sharing their experiences, when I'm showing empathy and concern, right? One of the worst things that I hear on sales calls is those like automatic answers, because people are just jumping on the script of like, okay, what's your biggest challenge? What's your goals? Okay, why is that important? And they're just jumping, and it's okay, great, okay, great, okay, great. But sometimes the prospect is telling you something vulnerable, something about
Yeah.
their confidence, about their debt, they're going to lose their house. And you're like, okay, great. That's not
Yeah.
natural. That's not
That's
human. That's not, if it was your cousin or your best friend, you wouldn't respond that way,
not
right?
human. Exactly right. Yeah.
No. So I think that humanizing the prospect and humanizing yourself, I always try and share at least something that I'm bad at, or something, some sort of vulnerability on a call, right? Because I don't want to be this like superhuman, because then it's like, oh, easy for you to say. Then I can be part of the excuse, right? I
Yeah.
want to share my experience and find that relatability. I don't believe in a rapport section. I think that's too forced. Like the first 2 minutes, ask them where they're from and what you do. It's okay to have the small talk, but that's not rapport. Rapport is finding the relatability and understanding that we are more similar than we are different. So
Yeah.
find those similarities throughout the call and show that you understand them on a deeper level. That's where the opportunity lies.
Yeah. That's so powerful. You're really hitting it. You really hit. I mean, as a matter of fact, just as an example, like my next question is about tonality, and you kind of just basically touched upon it, like because you're looking at, it's not just like, yeah, tonality is important, da da da. Encompassing a wide angle view of the entire, whole, conversation that would be a sales call,
Yeah.
and everything involved in it. You're looking at every part of it. So obviously tonality, right, is it comes with it goes. Like you just gave the horrible example, that example of that horrific situation where someone's telling them about their, and then you're saying, oh, really great, and you're moving on. It's the
Yeah.
being tone deaf, so you really want to have that, right?
Yeah. I see a lot of sales trainers having to teach it. And I think one of the problems, if the trainer is only telling you what to say and when to say it, you don't understand the mechanics of it. And
Yeah, you don't
so,
understand why you're supposed to be it in the first place. Yeah.
exactly. And so they're telling you what to say and how to say it because they know what works as far as manipulation and persuasion. But you don't really need tonality training if you understand what's happening. So
Yeah,
when you
I
have
totally agree.
genuine concern, you don't have to show concern. You don't have to say concern. You don't have to figure out the tone of concern. When you have natural concern,
Right.
then it shows. When you have natural empathy, it shows. When you're enthusiastic, if a prospect tells you, hey, I have a wedding coming up, right, in 3 months, and I want to look great. Like the excitement that you have for that person because you understand what that would feel like, that enthusiasm. And so tonality plays a huge role, but I wish less people would force it and come from a place of authenticity where they
Authenticity.
genuinely feel those things. And then they
Yeah.
don't need to like take a training program and learning, oh yeah, when they say this, act surprised.
Right.
Like stop
Yeah.
acting and just imagine it's your cousin or your uncle or your brother or your sister or your mom or dad, and feel what they're feeling. That's really the empathy that comes from sales.
So really listening skills is significantly important because you want to pay close attention to the nuances of what they're saying. I mean, not everything's gonna be so dramatic as them telling you this story about that or whatever, but you really have to have very powerful listening skills and pick up on all these nuances so you could react, right?
100%. Yeah. And I think, right, one of the things that happens is when we get nervous, we speed up. Right. And so in communication, when someone's nervous, they speed up. And so one thing I always teach my reps, whether in an interview or on a sales call, is like, slow down,
Yeah.
take time to consider, because we know the answer, right? Like we've been trained, oh, when they say this, here's how you handle that objection. But this is a new situation. And so if our friend is telling us something heavy or something exciting, like we're going to take the time to consider it, right? And
Yeah.
then give, personalize our answer. And so by slowing down, we get more opportunities for it to really hit us. And then we can respond in a genuine way instead of like, oh, I know the answer to this. Oh, I know, like when they say this, I got to go over here. Right. By slowing it down and just taking that time to consider, you'll find that it just becomes more genuine of a conversation because this is what happens in real life. So
Yeah.
then the prospect is going to feel considered. They're going to feel acknowledged. They're going to feel like you are listening, and it gives your mind some time to process, especially on the emotional side, what is actually happening here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have such a really humble, like really great approach to, sales. And it's almost like you don't even want to use the same word with, because you're really taking it the right way and doing the right, to do using sales in the right format and right way. So you probably really get upset, when sales get such a bad rap, or other people are not selling the right way, So is that really where you think sales get such a bad rap? Because a lot of times, I'm just coming from the place where I'm coming from. A lot of trainers and coaches don't, not a lot, but it's a lot of them don't want to do sales. Like they don't, they feel like their product and their reputation speaks for itself, and they don't have to, they shouldn't have to get into this position where they're trying to influence somebody making a decision. So, and maybe because it gets a bad rap that they're not a salesman, but if you approach it the way you're suggesting, I feel like that's the right way to do it. And, your thoughts on just sales in general having such a bad, reputation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I used to take it personal, and then I realized that in any disruption, there's an opportunity. And so, where's the opportunity here? For me, like, I hate those salespeople too.
Yeah.
And so, if a prospect is projecting that onto me, right, then instead of like taking offense to it, it's not me. Like they're not talking about JD Daley. They're not
Yeah.
talking about the kid that grew up in Nova Scotia. They don't know me. So
Yeah.
they're projecting what I represent, right? So the example I always use is like I've been traveling a while, and in Latin America and kind of all over, there's a lot of like street dogs, right? And so like if I go up to a street dog, right, and it growls at me, am I going to be like, oh, I can't believe he doesn't know how good of a person I am? Like I have a T-bone steak waiting at home for him. No,
Right.
like I am a cylinder thing that based on their experience, I represent danger,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm not going to take that personally. I understand what I represent, right? So for me, the real opportunity is like, again, this rapport building is finding like, and it's like, okay, the prospect doesn't like salespeople. I don't like salespeople. So we actually have a lot more in common. And
Yeah.
now all these competitive advantages of the experience they have, right? I can now differentiate. And I tell them and I show them how I am different, right?
Yeah.
The first thing I do on a sales call is tell them all the reasons why they shouldn't buy, right? And who we can't help and why. They've never been through a call like that,
Right.
right? I'm going through step by step. Hey, we
That's
don't
another
do
good
this.
idea.
This is my limiting factors, right? If you're looking for high production value, like I'm not that. I'm
Yeah.
recording in a hotel right now with very basic stuff. Like if you're looking for the online marketer who has everything planned out, I can turn on a Zoom call and that's about as good as it gets, right?
Yeah.
Like if that's what you're looking for, that then I'm not that. If you're looking for a classic sales trainer that's going to go through the script and sales process, I'm not that,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm willing and able to say, this is my limitation. This is what I'm not for. There's lots of people who offer that other stuff, right? And so not only am I showing them how I'm different, but I'm walking them through how I'm different. I'm giving them every opportunity to say, yeah, I did actually want that. Okay, let me connect you with someone else, right?
Yeah.
Not like the fake, oh, if our solution doesn't fit, like I'll point you in the right direction. There's a lot of salespeople put that in their script and they never help if it's
Yeah.
not for them, they don't point them in the right direction. It's just something to say. Because again, someone understands the psychology of persuasion. And so they put in these things inauthentically, right? But I actually show them, like, there are times
Yeah.
where I will turn them down and connect them with another program, another offer that makes more sense for where they're at. And so then you're building trust, and you're also kind of disrupting this mind of like, whoa, 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 I was expecting a certain salesperson on this call. What is this? Right? Like, I welcome concerns. I'm like, is there any areas where you think, this industry or what we're doing is bullshit? Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. I think opening up that space, it shakes people up of like, I thought you were going to be this way and you're not. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, now they don't know what to predict. And so you maintain control of the conversation again.
That's great. That's really, really great stuff. It made me think of like Macy's and Gimbal, like that in the Miracle 34th Street, how they sent them to Gimbal and back and forth, like what from the competition. So that's when you said that, but you're 100% right. So that's really, really great stuff. What is genuine selling? I mean, I feel like you've already kind of defined a lot of it already, but
Genuine selling comes from a place of first identifying what your job is. Your job to that prospect, they are the most important person on the planet for that 1 hour. Your job is to facilitate the best decision possible. If that's a no, your job should get them to be 100% confident that no is the right answer. If it's yes, your job is 100% yes, right? So your job is to put that prospect first and understand that if you have the right offer, if you have the right marketing, you will get the right amount of people. And knowing that, okay, if it's 20% or 30%, like the majority of people, it's either the wrong time or the wrong person, or the wrong offer, and that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's understanding, like, I come from a closer background. That's who I work with mostly. So one of the things that I've told people is like, being selfless actually has selfishness built in.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I'm working for a fitness coach or a business coach, right, I can get what I want, but only by getting two other people what they want. So focusing on what I want is not that important. But if I get the prospect a solution to their problems, right, and I get the business owner a qualified prospect to sign, right, I get what I want automatically.
Yeah.
So if I focus on service first, right, on facilitating that decision, then my job becomes much easier.
Yeah.
Realizing that most people are not going to be the right fit at the right time. So my job is to find the people who stand to benefit the most from this solution and receive and communicate information in a way that makes it easy for them to make the right decision. That's genuine selling. It's putting someone else's interest above your own, knowing that in the grand scheme of things, any individual sale is not more important than your integrity.
That's great stuff. That's really, really, really great stuff. So I have one last question for you. What are some mistakes fitness professionals should avoid when trying to close a sale?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the biggest one is trying to convince, right? There's a deeper psychology that I won't get into, but the idea is like, we know it as kids, right? When someone runs after us, what do? We run away.
Yeah.
Right. And we know that this is inevitable in dating, right? When we want someone, we kind of overstep too much and then they're like resistant, right? And so understanding that convincing someone is a low form of influence, it's kind of below persuasion, and that being able to guide the prospect to make their own decisions. And we walk through something in UCM called the therapist, the doctor, the lawyer, but it's 3 forms of questioning that kind of build on it, right? And a lawyer, even if everybody in the room knows that this person is guilty, unless the lawyer can ask the questions that get the person on the stand to say the right answers, to say the words, it doesn't mean anything, right? And so we can know, as we have a clear advantage in that we know the solution, we know the case studies, we know that the transformation, we know that the prospect is going to struggle if they don't do these things. The prospect might not know those things, right? And so I think the biggest thing is kind of trying to convince that, okay, well, you have to do this and do that, and we take over. Right? What I want to do is start asking a form of questions that leads a prospect to the path where they realize the answer. that I'm not giving them the answer, that I'm not telling them the answer, that I'm drawing the answer out of them. Right. When we do that, all of a sudden there's a different energy that really helps for us. Right. And we're able to
Yeah.
close more deals because it comes more naturally. We're able to guide the prospect into making the right decision.
Yeah. That is great. I so much of what you've said here today just resonates with me very, very deeply, and it really how I conduct myself and some of my businesses. You really is preaching to the choir. So this was really a treasure trove of advice and just information that you've really provided here. I could really keep you on here and talk to you all day long. This is so easy, so this has been really, really great. But I very much appreciate you coming on the podcast today. And just I want to give you a moment that if so, what kind of clients do you service exactly? Do you do everything? Like, I know I went through the list before, but do you provide setters and closers, or I mean, tell me a little bit about your business.
Absolutely. So Undeniable Closer Mastermind is a mentorship and mastermind program that works with remote salespeople. We help people of all qualifications, from someone starting out and looking to transition from 9 to 5 to remote sales. And we focus on people that have, the good to great transition. So people that have been in the industry and looking to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
So we focus on the career and personal development side. So personal, professional, right? How to manage their time and their calendar, all those things, and
Yeah.
how to build confidence. And then the other side is, the networking, outreach, interviews, everything to make sure they have the right clients. And then the performance side. So how to onboard, how to improve your sales, how to advance your career, leadership, all those aspects. And then also we make sure that we pair them with high integrity coaches and entrepreneurs. So we're kind of a one-stop shop. We're very hands-on in a mentorship. So I commit to each person individually that their success is deeply tied to my success. If they lose, I lose, and I don't like to lose.
Yeah.
And so we're working with them every step of the way to become better, not only in sales, but just a better version of themselves.
Awesome. That's really, really great. And if anybody wants to learn more about or find you, where could they find you?
So just searching undeniablecloser.com. We have one of the largest Facebook groups in the industry, Undeniable Closer Remote Sales. I can give you some links, or we have Instagram, YouTube. We're all over Undeniable Closer. Yeah, check us out.
Yeah, we'll plug those in. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time here. And this was great. You've been very generous with all the information you've given. And I think it's been really informative. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You too.